Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the VCTA Broadband Association, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have the Secretary of Education with us today, Atif. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well, Woody.
Well, somebody told me that your current job can't be hard because you used to be an 8th grade teacher.
Right, that is true. If you could teach 8th grade, you could do anything.
Tell us a little bit about early childhood education. I know it's a real project for the First Lady.
Right.
Why it's so important?
Well, thank you for that question. It's a really big initiative. If you want more details as your viewers, they can go to vaearlyed.org. It has all the nuances about the initiative. This is something important to us because, research is very clear, is that 90% of the brain development occurs from birth to 5. And also what our data shows us is that we have about nearly 3/4 of our students who are at risk, 3-year-olds, they don't have access to quality early childhood education, and nearly 1/4 of our at-risk 4-year-olds don't have access to early childhood education. That is why this very robust package that the governor's introduced in collaboration with the Virginians across the state. This is not a governor's package, this is a package for what Virginians want. So the First Lady did a lot of touring, put thousands of miles of travel, listening to communities all across the Commonwealth, as did I, as did our agencies and our Chief School Readiness Officer. And there is a desire from Virginians to really focus on quality early childhood education. So this particular package that the governor introduced is new spending of nearly $95 million. $95 million. It'll help about 11,000 new students, at-risk 3 and 4-year-olds. And the piece of legislation is up to about 154 pages. It's really consolidating a lot of functions to bring more efficiency, maximize on our federal subsidies. Because we have Head Start for decades, has served our most vulnerable students and their families for a very long time. They're a major player. We want to, make sure that they're part of this effort, and also this early childhood package cannot be done effectively without a public-private partnership. So this package also includes mixed delivery grants to encourage those public-private partnerships as we build capacity to get more and more students in our quality early childhood settings.
So what does that educational opportunity consist of?
The educational opportunity, one of the things is that what we find is that even the students that 75% of our students who are in a setting where there are publicly subsidized dollars, we're finding is that there's, we need to do a better job in looking at quality and really measuring quality. So providing the quality access. And the reason that's important is that we want to make sure that all of our children, when they get to kindergarten, they're kindergarten ready in their literacy, in their math and social emotional skills. So that's why this robust package, this piece of legislation is very critical to focus on the quality piece. And in addition to that, we have to support our early childhood practitioners better. So if we're supporting them better, they have better compensation, they have better professional development and preparation. That also helps with the quality piece. As a matter of fact, on an unrelated but related item, in the G3 initiative, the tuition-free community college that the governor has proposed, one of the high-need areas he's identified is early childhood education.
So tell us a little bit more about the resources that you need to accomplish these kinds of programs, because our children bring a multitude of social problems to schools with them that didn't exist 50 years ago.
Right. So it's not that their problems didn't exist a long time ago. It's just now we have better, understanding on how we can address the social emotional supports. What we're finding is that a child might have had an adverse childhood experience that might not be, seen later on in their life, or it could be seen immediately. So, really understanding that, really being more trauma responsive, being more culturally responsive, and having those social emotional supports is very key and critical to this. And another thing I want to touch on is that for a very long time, the last 30 years or so, we have led our entire education continuum from early childhood all the way through K through 12 to higher ed. We have led with high stakes testing, and we are trying to transition from a high stakes testing culture to a culture focused on deeper learning. And we want to make sure that from a very early setting, our students are able to really use their imagination, think creatively, think critically, ask good questions on how we can make the world or their surroundings a better place, be able to communicate with each other and collaborate, and really think about their broader community. How can they be good community-minded citizens? So that is also very key from a very early age.
So those are the 5 C's I think
That
I've
is
seen.
right.
I've seen on the website. How does that relate to the standards of learning and standards of quality?
That's a great question. So standards of learning, which are our actual standards that we the content areas that all the different content areas teach, and that's what our curriculum framework is based on. And then our standards of quality is like staffing ratios, for example. What are the staffing ratios for school counselors per students, or for nurses and social workers and psychologists? So one of the things that as a state we need to do a better job, and we're finally doing that, is really looking at our support positions and their staffing ratios. Because the ratios are quite antiquated. For example, the school counselor ratio, the evidence-based gold standard is 1 counselor for every 250 students for the entire grade band. That is something that we had not addressed, that ratio, until last year when the governor initiated getting to that evidence-based ratio. So he has actually a significant amount of money dedicated. So by the time he leaves office, he wants to get to that gold standard for the entire grade band.
So what is it now?
Right now, it varies for elementary, middle, and high school. It's nearly 1 counselor for like about 400 some students. But I've done a lot of roundtables on this, and the way what it is in our SOQs and what we've funded. I found cases where there is a counselor in an elementary school, and she may have a workload of about 700 students. So that's what we're really trying to address, is get to that 1 to 250 for the entire grade band. That really helps with the social emotional learning. It puts social emotional learning at the forefront, because these are licensed professionals who get in their pre-service as they're preparing to be a licensed school counselor, or in their professional development that's ongoing, they focus on things like trauma-informed practices. Not only that, it also helps with better career planning as well, because school counselors by design in their programs serve both functions, and that those both things are equally important. So that's why we prioritize this specific position, but this is an ongoing conversation where after we have addressed the ratios for school counselors, we just can't stop there. We have to think about what can we do with our school psychologists, or social workers, or nurses, and other positions that provide those social and emotional supports.
So is there additional funding for those types?
In this particular budget, we haven't addressed all of the different proposed standards of quality that the Board of Ed, but that's a marker that we have to get to, and we're being very assertive. So one of the other areas we've addressed is English language learners. The English language learner ratios have not been addressed since 2006. They have not been updated, but since then, Our immigrant communities have exponentially grown. Our need for providing more support for English language learners is exponentially grown. We've analyzed dropout rates for different groups, and our new immigrants who need those supports for English language, they're at more risk of not completing their K-12 education. So that's why this is an area that we also focused on. In addition to that, the governor also did funding what we call the at-risk add-on. That is funding that really helps our small school divisions, or rural school divisions, or school divisions that have a high level concentration of poverty, where their challenges are compounded. So the at-risk add-on amount that the governor proposed for this K-12 funding is the largest ever, and that is something that's proven to work really well.
Now understand, we also have a significant number of schools that are very old or dilapidated. I think you've done a statewide tour. I think you visited a school that's 111 years old.
That's right. Built in 1909. It's a significant concern. And last year, the governor did about $80 million for a literary fund. It's a low-interest loan. And historically, we've said that, okay, this is a responsibility that falls on the localities. I understand there are a variety of bills that are circulating about infrastructure. If I'm being forthright, we need to have a statewide conversation on infrastructure, because it's not only our aging schools, but it's our aging hospitals, it's our aging roads, it's our aging government buildings, and the state really needs to have some form of a body that does a deep analysis on all of our infrastructures and really prioritize and to really have a plan, because it's going to be a significant investment. And one of the things that I hear is that, well, because of the recession, we weren't addressing, we've tied this to the recession, but that building that was 111 years old, 10 years ago, it was 101 years old. 20 years ago, it was 91 years old. 30 years ago, when our economy was booming, it was 81 years old. How come we didn't do anything about that? And a lot of these buildings that were built during the New Deal era, but they were built, and by design, I've done some research, that they had to be retrofitted and updated every 40 years. At least, that was the 20 years is ideal, but every 40 years you had to retrofit them. But they've been neglected in the Commonwealth. For some reason, we've really neglected our aging buildings, and we're not really refreshed them and retrofitted them for better usage. So we need to do a deep analysis to see which buildings have the bones to really retrofit them for better use. And then second thing is, if we are going to introduce new infrastructure, new buildings, we have an opportunity to have conversations. Can we make them more energy efficient? Can we make them more environmentally friendly? There are some areas in the Commonwealth that have done that, localities that have been really bold about making sure that their new schools are done through an environmental and equity lens. And actually, one of the schools that were recognized by UC Berkeley is Bluestone Elementary in Harrisonburg. I visited that school, and it's out of this world. They were able to do it efficiently on very good, they did a very prudent review, and they did, it was done really in a good fiscally manner, but it really accomplished a lot of the purposes, a lot of things I'm talking about. So there are models, but can we scale them statewide and really have a deep conversation? So that's, if I'm being forthright, we just need to have a really robust conversation collectively as a state with all the stakeholders to see what we can do about our infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure is very important. I saw an amazing number once. It relates back to early childhood education. Mm-hmm. Kids who are in the 3rd grade and can't read at that level, more likely than not, will wind up in our criminal justice system, ultimately in our jails and our correctional facilities.
Right, and the leading indicator is, is really wealth or lack of access to wealth, right? It's poverty that really, puts individuals in a tough situation to figure out how to find compensation to support themselves and their families. And that's where, we need to have, so I have a very K-12 bias. And I also, when I came into this position, I had to broaden my scope and think about early ed, think about affordable access to higher education, and think broadly. But even more so, as more days go by and being the administration, I'm actually taking a step back and looking at the big picture. Because for our students, it's if you really are doing a deep analysis on dropouts, for example, and as Virginia as a state, we do a really good job making sure that our students get through high school. However, we can continue to improve is that we also need to have conversations about affordable housing and rent control, and just wages in general. Which in our education settings we're not making those connections necessarily, and that's what I'm encouraging folks to, hey, let's have those conversations. If you look at the governor's overall budget, it's trying to address maternal health, affordable housing, criminal justice reform in general, and all these things are connected to education as well, and that's where I'm encouraging a lot of my friends in the education community to think big. How are all these things connected? We're hoping to set some good models and precedents that the state, the next administration that follows us, can continue to build on these precedents that we're setting.
Are our school resource officers being used appropriately? I get a number of members in here who complain about that in this whole school to prison pipeline that they perceive, at least, especially in terms of minority students, students who are mentally and physically challenged, who happen to act out, those kinds of issues.
Right. This is something we were really mindful of when we did the during the last year and a half or so through our children's cabinet, the governor's children's cabinet. One of the work groups was a group on student and school safety. Myself and Secretary Brian Moran were the two chairpersons for that, and we had experts from all across the state in the healthcare profession, in the law enforcement profession, in the education profession. We did a lot of deep analysis. And this is actually one of the conversations that came up, is that with school resource officers, if we're going to do more grant funding, what are some of the things we're going to ask of the localities? So really focusing on model articulation agreements between a school division and a law enforcement agency to make sure that our school resource officers, if they are working in our school settings, that they get their professional development and being trauma responsive. They understand what our adverse childhood experiences are, that they're culturally responsive. So if they have an incident where there is a student of color who happens to also have an IEP, which provide the accommodations if they have a special needs, and also might have faced adverse childhood experiences. How is that student going to react if you approach them in an assertive manner? It's really traumatic for that childhood, and what things might be triggered in that child's mind. So having that professional development is very, very important. So that's something that when we put out those recommendations and new funding, that's what we are working with our localities to really focus on those MOUs that really clearly define that that professional development is done, and that is done really well. And a school resource officer, they should be part of that community. They shouldn't be seen as somebody who is coming in to handcuff a child and really get them in trouble. It's somebody that a student can rely on for help, for advice, for guidance, that they're part of that community and really integrated. And there are good models that exist, and that's what we're trying to study, is that how can we replicate good models so that school resource officers really is part of that community. Diversity is a big piece as well. Diversity is not only an issue in the education workforce, it's also an issue in our law enforcement workforce, is that research clearly indicates that if you have a diverse workforce and you're working with our young people, that those shared experiences really help, because those shared experiences really help with gaining empathy and really understanding having a better cultural understanding that what is happening. And we've looked at our discipline rates. Diversity plays a positive impact on creating less punitive systems, specifically for our students of color. So that's something that we need to do both in the education space and the law enforcement space, especially when there's an intersection of the two.
How are our teachers doing? I know it's a monumental task to continue to attract and retain good teachers, especially at the salary levels they are at now.
Absolutely. There's 99,000 teachers in the Commonwealth. Overall, we have about 180,000 staff, teachers and staff. And we've analyzed shortages for not only for our teachers, but our support staff as well. Of the 99,000, we have about a shortage of about 800 some teachers. So it's less than 0.5%. It might not sound like a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but if you do a deep analysis of the 800 or so some positions, that where we see a shortage, there's a significant concern with special education, and also though that situation is compounded in economically disadvantaged schools. And that's what we're really trying to hone in on. That's where the at-risk funding really helps. That's where providing more supports with the school counselors really helps. And then talking about salaries, yeah, we have to embrace the fact that we are behind the national average in salaries. That's why the governor last year, he led the effort in doing a 5% increase, which was the largest in 15 years. In this biennium budget, it's only 3% in the second part of the biennium. Having said that, our office is really engaged in doing a deep analysis, not only about national average, but we have to have a conversation about median income. And we can't just look at it as an entire state, we have to look at region by region. So for example, a Northern Virginia Division X, how do they compare to their median income and their cost of living and their median household income compared to, say, DC? Or a Division Y in Southwest Virginia, how do they compare with all the nuances compared to a division in North Carolina? And are we doing things that are competitive to our surrounding states? That's salaries, that is support staff, that is our buildings. It's a whole package of things that we're doing to support our students and our teachers.
Isn't there a provision in Virginia law that provides that teachers should receive a competitive salary, and that's based upon the national average?
There, there is, language that's there to, really look at that. But having said that, I do want to encourage folks to look beyond the national average. Because the national average really masks other things. Because say if we get to a national average, is that good enough? I'm saying we should be at a gold standard in salaries too, right? And we have to look at cost of living. We have to look at median household income. There's so many other costs. I mean, majority of a family's cost is housing. We have to address affordable housing for our educators as well. And that's something that we need to really do a deep analysis and see, are we addressing that well? Because my fear is that, okay, we get to a national average. Right now, for example, in Northern Virginia Division, there are divisions that are $10,000 or $11,000 above the national average, but the cost of living is exponentially high. And that's a significant concern. And in rural parts of the Commonwealth, we might be doing okay compared to, say, North Carolina Division, but have we looked at the median household incomes? Have we looked at our support positions? Because do we have the adequate amount of support positions for our students and teachers? There's a lot of nuances, and we need to do a thorough review of all of those.
I see this as Career and Technical Education Month. I saw a memo from the superintendent. That's a very important initiative that the governor is championing.
It is. There has been for far too long that success is equated with going to a four-year college or university. We want to take the negative stigma away. If somebody wants to pursue a career right after high school, or if they want to go to the military, or they want to go into a two-year community college setting, all those options are viable, and we want to equally give importance to our CTE career pathways as we do to our AP classes. That's very, very critical. That's something that the governor believes in, I believe in. I'm a product of community college. So that's something that's really important, and these are meaningful careers that help our communities. These are meaningful careers that uplift individuals to get into, really have decent wages. That is why not only our focus in our K-12 CTE settings, we've done a variety of things there, but even with the G3 initiative, with the high need areas, that the governor is rolling out, he's a big believer.
Talk to us a little bit more about that G3 initiative. It's go to school, hopefully get a job, and then give back to your community,
right.
I believe.
Right. That's what, get a skill, get a job, and give back. And the governor, again, this is not something that is just a governor's package, right? He's coined G3, but this is what Virginians want, right? We have heard from all across the state, all parts of the Commonwealth, that they're in support of this tuition-free community college model, where it's focusing on high-need areas. And it's really, in order for us to build for this, last year we repurposed our WIOA funds to flip the model upside down so our community college can better equip and focus on those skill-based classes first, and it really create that stackable version. We studied every single model in the nation on community colleges, and some of the community colleges have only focused on the free aspect. Some have focused on high need areas. Some have focused on wraparound services beyond tuition, right? Child care and so forth. Mm-hmm. This is the only model in the country which takes all three and puts it into one. And that's why this is so special, that it's really targeted, it's very strategic, focusing on our most vulnerable students, giving them an opportunity to go into high need areas, giving them tuition, covering their tuition fees and so forth. But if you're full Pell eligible, you're enrolled full time, also giving you a wraparound services in the form of a stipend to cover your childcare costs, your food and rent, and so forth, so you don't have to do 3 jobs while you're going to community college. So it's a very well thought out package. I give credit to the governor, give credit to my team, give credit to our chief workforce advisor, Dr. Healy, and our community college system, and all the stakeholders who the last 2 years worked really actively in putting this package together.
And I see that dual enrollment with community colleges is something that's become more and more significant.
It is, and it's benefiting a lot of students, specifically students who are in rural settings, and our students who are economically disadvantaged. It's really working well, and we want to continue to build on that.
Now, we have some great institutions of higher learning in the state, but as you know, the costs keep going up. How are we dealing with that? Yeah,
tuition cost is a concern. Housing costs, living on college campus is actually in some instances it's higher than tuition costs. Last year, we were fortunate that our public institutions, there was didn't raise tuition. There was a package of need-based financial aid and tuition moderation. One of the things that we believe in is that we want to focus on need-based financial aid. The governor's introduced new additional dollars of $45 million in this biennium budget on need-based financial aid. He's also done $4,000 per student for the tuition assistance grant, which helps our private institutions, because we really believe in helping the student directly with need-based financial aid. That's very, very critical. In addition to that, some of our institutions that have done a really good job with serving our underserved institutions like a George Mason and ODU, they're also getting help with enrollment growth. And then one of the things that we have neglected as a nation and as a state is our historically black colleges and universities. So our 2 public HBCUs of Virginia State and Norfolk State, we worked actively with them the last 2 years to get guidance on building a robust package. So the governor's introduced nearly $300 million of investment for our HBCUs, which also includes that wraparound services piece that I was talking about in G3. That's also part of the HBCU package as well. There will be a big announcement in a few days of something else that's in the package. That's already public, but we're going to celebrate that with our HBCU. So there is, we're giving putting a lot of attention to making sure that we create that affordable access.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. Virginia is definitely for learners.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the VCTA Broadband Association. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.